We're covering a subject that is very, it's not covered enough for various reasons. The issue of sexual relations, particularly forbidden sexual relations. And we're doing it in the context of war. And it's a tool of war. And one of the reasons that it does not get discussed a lot is that rabbis are uncomfortable talking about sexual relations in a public way. On a one-to-one pastoral care interview or discussion, a rabbi provides guidance, but it's often not a subject to discuss in public, in a big crowded audience. Some people are immature, and they laugh and they make jokes, even when the rabbi's serious, if he makes a reference. And it's a subtle subject. It leads to some misunderstanding, and people walk away with wrong ideas. And it's one of the central, sex is one of the central motivators in all of human life. We all know that. People murder because of sex. We've been watching in America for the last month this trial of Sean Diddy Combs, whatever his name is, which is just so extraordinarily disgusting. But it really is kind of a metaphor for the worst parts of the culture, how far sex can drive people to become animals rather than human beings. We have murder, rape, all kinds of things. Guy like Harvey Weinstein, he lost an empire. How hard it must have been for him and his brother to create a film studio that finally would, you create a film studio, you need money, you have to access millions of dollars, find places, get the right script, hire the actors. When you watch a movie, at the end of the movie, there's about 10 minutes of names on the screen credits. Look what it takes to produce a movie. And he finally reached the apex of power, and he could have remained at the top because his movies, the Miramax movies, are great, by and large. And it all went down because of sex. And so it goes. Whether it's in Hollywood, whether it's regular people, families get destroyed, children get destroyed, relationships end. It's an extraordinarily powerful force, and we all know this. I don't get asked to be a rabbi to lay that out. And it is not normally discussed, but in the context of our year-and-a-half-long exploration of Jewish law and ethics at times of war, time came to bring this up. Because as I was learning and studying and preparing classes, I came across initially the case of Mordechai Vanunu, which I had taught about years ago. But I taught about it just in an isolated context of Mordechai Vanunu, an interesting story of how the Mossad had used a sexual lure to get him back from Europe. But now it suddenly had occurred to me that there's a lot more going on, that Yael in the Bible, we learned it for several weeks, used the lure of sex to take down Sisera, the general of the Canaanites, who made war against Israel. She took him down. And so it goes. Over the course of many years, I've read occasionally an article in the Jerusalem Post or in Ma'ariv about an Israeli soldier here or there who was lonely at the front or with his unit, and he's on his smartphone, and he goes on a dating site and he starts a relationship with someone, and it sounds like she's special, and he agrees to meet at a coffee shop somewhere, unaware that the woman is not a woman, but an Arab male terrorist who's waiting for him at the coffee shop to kill him. And So it's contemporary. Mordechai Vanunu, and I even showed you a brief clip that'll go back to, in greater context, about how Avishai Raviv was hired by the Mossad to be an agent provocateur to make the Israeli right wing look bad. Israel has a horrible left-wing deep state, worse than America. It extends from the court system to the Shin Bet, which is their FBI, a horrific deep state, left-wing deep state that works to sabotage people on the right wing. And they got this guy, Avishai Raviv. They placed him in the right wing for the purpose of convincing right-wingers to do things that the public would be repulsed by, would revile, and to make the right wing look bad. So at demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations by the right wing, Avishai Raviv would be there to start up violence, instigate people to start throwing rocks at the army, at the police. And in order to gain the confidence of the right-wing kids who followed him, he had to present himself as a real guy, as a serious, mature leader. And so the Mossad had to marry someone whom he did not care about at all. He married her. He had a baby or two with her. And as soon as his assignment a few years later with the Mossad came to an end, he just got up and walked out of the marriage and shocked her. He never had any interest in her. He simply had done a fake marriage. She didn't know it. They had all the trimmings of a marriage. And she had no idea that the Mossad simply had put him in to get married. Convince some woman that you love her, and then go and start riots. And you could let people know you're married. And so it's a very powerful thing. And tonight's class is important because I'm going back, they all are, going back to Chumash now for this one, to chapter 24, Paragraph Dalet of Sefer Bamidbar, Book of Numbers. The story of Balak and Moab and Midian and Bil'am. So briefly to recount what that's all about as we move on from the Yael story. Back in the Bible, in the Chumash, the Jewish people were marching on to Eretz Yisrael, the promised land. And they had to get through certain territories. They had no interest in conquering those lands, just getting through to get to the Jordan River and cross over. And they were approaching the country of Moab, English M-O-A-V, or M-O-A-B, should be V. And Balak, the king of Moab, saw them approaching and was terrified because he knew they had destroyed Egypt, the greatest world power at the time, and that they were unstoppable. And he was afraid that he's next. In those days, people were very, very, to use today's terminology, you would call them superstitious. But that's if you don't believe in religion and you don't believe in God. So you would call it superstitious. But if you believe in God, it's called religious. When a Jew says, I'll do the following, God willing, is he saying God willing as a superstition? Secular people assume he doesn't really believe that. He's just superstitious. When he says God willing, or thank God, he doesn't mean it. But religious people, we really mean it. And the same with non-Jews who are religious. They really mean it. And they really believe in it. Real Christians really believe in that. Catholics really believe in it. There are a lot of Christians and Catholics who don't believe. They go through the motions. They go to church on Sunday, or they don't even. They go to Christmas and New Year's or Christmas and Easter. But what do they really believe? But there are a lot of Protestants and Catholics who really, really believe very deeply. And they base their entire lives based on those beliefs. Sometimes to the Jewish disadvantage. Rooted in those beliefs, they hate Jews. And then there are others rooted in the same Christian Bible who love Jews because of those beliefs. And we Orthodox Jews, we really believe it. Reformed Jews, they don't believe anything. There is more of a superstition. If they really believed, they wouldn't be in a Reformed temple. Conservative Jews are complicated. Rav Moshe Feinstein once wrote in more than one responsum that the average conservative Jew does believe. The rabbis, they're professionals, the rabbis, the cantors, they don't believe because they are educated, they know right from wrong, and they've chosen wrong. Whereas the average layman in a conservative temple, as often as not, they are there for the purpose of social activity. They have friends there, there are activities there. Maybe they find the Orthodox service goes too long, it's all in Hebrew, it's stultifying. So Rav Moshe says we have to assume most conservative Jews truly believe in God. But we have to also assume that the rabbis and cantors are apikorsim, that they're atheists, they don't believe. And there's a lot of halacha that comes out of that. And in the same way, in other words, if you're an Orthodox rabbi and you have a bar mitzvah in your shul, and the family invites friends, including people who go to the conservative congregation, if a conservative member of the congregation, the family wants to call them up for an aliyah to honor them, are you allowed to call them up? So you're allowed to call them up. Do you answer amen to their bracha? You do, but you're not allowed to call up a conservative rabbi or a conservative cantor in your Orthodox shul because they're apikorsim, they're atheists. Their prayers have no meaning. When they say, "Blessed art thou, O God, our Lord, King of the universe," they don't mean it. They say it, but they don't mean the God from whom every single word of the Torah emanates. Every word of the Torah is true. There really were millions, 3 million at Mount Sinai receiving the Torah. They don't believe it. They don't believe literally everything happened. And they don't believe that God really, that you have to observe Kashrut and Shabbat the way the halacha is. So when we get into all of this, we get back to this issue that we're covering of what was going on in Moab when the king of Moab, Balak, so much believed in God, his God, that he called a prophet of God, non-Jewish prophet, Bil'am, to place a curse, actually an execration. That is not a curse like the F word or some dirty word, but to execrate, to put a whammy on the Jewish people. Because he believed there's no other way we, the Moabites, will be able to defeat them in battle unless they are cursed from above. And none of us is worthy to bring such a curse on them, except for the greatest prophet of our time outside the Jewish world, Bil'am. So he brought Bil'am to place the curse. And we know the story, very famous story. Bil'am has Balak offer sacrifices to prepare God to accept prayers, to offer sacrifice. And then Bil'am speaks the curse. And what happens, according to our rabbis, is he goes into a trance. And basically words come out of his mouth. Like if you ever see or ever saw a clip of like these, not all evangelicals, but like the Jimmy Swaggart group, just passed away last week, the Assemblies of God, where they talk in tongues. So Bil'am started talking in tongues, and words came out of his mouth. And theoretically, he didn't even know what he was saying. He was in a trance, like hypnotized, where when you snap your finger and they come out of the trance, they don't even know what they were doing. And the words that came out of his mouth were blessings on the Jews. And it angered and upset the king Balak so much that, and Bil'am said, maybe you brought me to the wrong hilltop. And I was looking at a particular segment of the Jewish encampment that are righteous. Let's go to another hilltop and look at another segment, maybe less righteous. And this happens like 3 times. And each time the Jews are righteous. And he goes in his trance and he blesses the Jews. So after the 3rd time, Balak says, I brought you to curse them. You'll bless them. Get out of here. I was going to make you rich and famous. Already I named for you a high salary. And I was going to give you a tip, a bonus. Instead, just get out of here. I owe you money. I'll pay you for your time, but I don't want to see you anymore. Get out of here. So Balak leaves the Moabites. As he leaves the Moabites, Bil'am leaves the Moabites, and as he leaves the Moabites, again, he's a man of God. He's not a man of the God of Israel, but he's a man of God. And again, all because someone does not believe exactly in the God of Israel, if he's not Jewish or she's not Jewish, believes elsewhere, don't take away from them the sincerity of their beliefs, especially when their belief is focused primarily on the creator of the universe. In many ways, it's the same belief. Okay, let's say Christian, let's say evangelicals, they believe a great deal in what we Orthodox Jews believe in. We only part ways on the question as to whether the Messiah already has come and will be returning or has not yet come. That's where we part ways. And that doesn't necessarily have to have been a source of so much mass death over the last 2,000 years. And for many evangelicals, it's not a source of hatred. It's a recognition we have a difference of understanding. And so they respect what they call the Old Testament, what we call Tanakh, the Bible. They respect it as we respect it. They believe that Jesus came and created a Brit Chadashah, a new covenant, a New Testament as well. And we don't believe that. But otherwise, otherwise sounds like it's nothing. It's basically we respect each other. And they respect that in Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 3, God said to Abraham, the founder of all of our religions, all of our monotheistic religions, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will curse. And Protestant evangelicals bless Jews, and we've talked about it before, because the Bible says to bless Jews. And I've told you personal anecdotes. I won't take out the time right now again. I'm sure I will in the future, where Christians have come to me, they see my kippah, and just on the street in Orange County, they bless me. It's happened to me quite a few times. Now, I'm sure it would not be happening in Columbia University, but that's because they don't believe in God there. But I've met Christians who believe in God, and they will bless me. And that's how it goes. So the Torah tells us that Balaam went and was trying to scratch his head. How do I put a curse on these people? A freebie. I collected my pay. I did my job. I warned them that the words that come out of my mouth will be those that God puts into my mouth. So I did what I said I would do, but I feel bad. They were hoping for a different result. It's sort of like, God forbid, someone goes to the hospital for surgery, and you have to sign all these disclosures. And we cannot promise you that everything's going to come out the way you want. We hope it will. We'll take every precaution and every procedure, and usually XYZ, but here are the disclaimers. So Bil'am gave him disclaimers, and it did not work out. But he felt bad. So he got to the core of it. He said, you know what the problem is? God won't let me curse these people because they are righteous. If you want to kill them in battle, you actually are going about it the wrong way. Instead of first trying to put on the curse and then beat them, first make them unrighteous. Turn them away from God. Make God angry at them. In other words, he's a religious man. And he truly believes that the way to destroy the Jews is to turn God's favor away from the Jews by making the Jews sin. That's biblical. And that is something we Orthodox Jews, namely we Jews, have never stopped believing. If you ever wonder, why did religious Jews try to persuade non-religious Jews to keep Shabbat, to be kosher? Hopefully we try to persuade in a nice way. We invite you for a Shabbat meal. We teach classes. We don't do it like the Inquisition or the Crusades, where they said, either you become our religion or we kill you. We try to do it the nice way. But what do we care? Like, what do you care if I'm a person who's not religious? What do you care if I'm not religious? Leave me alone. And the reason we care goes back to what we're learning tonight, among other things we're learning tonight, that the destiny of all Jewish people lies with the nationhood. If the Jews sin as a people, which is what Bil'am set about to do, then we risk losing the favor of God in war. That's what Thursday night class is. War, battle. And if we have the favor of God, then we win. Well, that sounds pretty superstitious. Most people would say, seems to me you win if you have better weapons, precision missiles. You really need some of those bunker busting bombs to take out Fordo and the B-2, the B-2 flyers, jets to carry them. And you need training and skills, and you need strategy. Doesn't seem like you're going to defeat Iran and take out their nuclear power simply by believing in God. And then you find that truly religious Jews believe, yeah, you have to do all of that. You have to have the best missiles, precision guided, best training, best soldiers, best tanks, grenades, launchers. You have to have the best of all that. But even more fundamentally, you have to be a Torah nation. You have to support Torah, and you have to have Torah in Israel. Because if the community of Israel in the land of Israel is not a Torah society, it will not benefit from God's blessings. And if it is a Torah society, he will do wonders and miracles. And we've become so used to all his wonders and miracles that we don't even recognize the wonders and miracles. Well, of course, Israel took out the Iranian nukes. They worked on it for 10 years, and they had strategy, and they had placed people in Iran, and they knew this, and they did this, and they trained this. And Trump came with his weapons. And of course, Israel knocked out Hezbollah with those pagers. It was a brilliant conception. It was 10 years in the making, setting up front companies around Asia that would sell the beepers and sending out marketing professionals to go to Nasrallah, convince them that the beepers would be more secure and safer way to communicate, that with using smartphones and texting, the Israelis can kind of home in on all your texting and they could find your locations. Whereas if you do beepers, you can, and so with strategy and walkie-talkies, all of that makes sense. But what if, how easily it all could have gone down south? Didn't Jimmy Carter send Americans to Iran to free the American hostages? If you don't know, the answer is yes. And what happened? As the Americans in their helicopters and attack vessels were flying just about into Iran, there was a sandstorm. And the sandstorm got into the propellers and got into the engines, and the helicopters all crashed, I think into each other or into the ground, and all the people died. And the entire operation failed. They never even got into Iran. So what's the response? What luck? It might have succeeded if it weren't for the sandstorm. How about another response? God did not bless it with a miracle. And God, on the other hand, when Israel sent in her people to take out that night, what was it? Was it June 23rd, to take Iran apart and kill 9 or 11 commanders of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and to take out the 9 or 11 nuclear scientists, all at the same time as you're blowing up Natanz and Isfahan and all over the place and taking out the ballistic missiles and taking out their defenses. And it all happened at once, and the skies were clear and everything worked perfectly. Ever occurred that maybe that was a miracle? And what if Biden and Kamala Harris had been president? If Kamala Harris had been president, well, take a look. How did Macron relate to it in France? And Keir Starmer in England? I'm not even talking about Arabs. I'm talking about our friends. They all condemned it. Keir Starmer in England, Macron, they all have condemned it. You can be quite sure Kamala Harris would have been condemning it. and would have been embargoing. You think she would have sent weapons to take out Fordo? Isn't it a miracle? Whatever you think about Trump, isn't it a miracle that at that moment in time, America had the president who would send the B-52 bombers together with the bunker busting bombs to take out Fordo? At that moment in time, we did not need Biden 4 years earlier or 3 years earlier. What about at that moment in time? No one thinks about the hand of God. It's all the hand of God. That Nasrallah bought into the pager idea and that it worked. And then they got word, Israel got word from their intelligence that some of the pagers were starting to act up. They were starting to overheat. After all, they were not regular pagers. They had a different kind of battery that would explode, not just an Energizer bunny. Consequently, they moved up ahead the date of the beeper explosions. It was supposed to be a little bit later. They were afraid someone's going to look at the overheating beepers and figure out there's something going on here. Nobody would have figured out what it was, because who would think such a thing? And so they got word and they blew them up then. But it could have gone wrong. And the walkie-talkies could have gone wrong. And so on and so forth. Indeed, how do you explain Israel still being around, surrounded by 23 Arab Muslim countries? You want to know how many? Go online and look up Organization of Arab States. There's the Arab League. It's made up of Arabs. There's 23 or so Arab Muslim countries. Every Arab country is Muslim. There's no Arab Christian country, Jewish country, non-religious country. Every Arab country is Muslim. And then there are a few non-Arab Muslims as well. Iranians are not Arabs, they're Muslims. Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia. Okay. Israel's surrounded. It makes no sense that Israel's still around. The United Nations votes against Israel. Everybody in the world against Israel except for the United States. Never once has England or France cast a veto. There are 5 countries, the permanent members of the Security Council, who have veto. Russia and China, forget about them. France and England. Never once has France or England cast a veto on behalf of Israel. Only America. It's a miracle that there is one and only one country that does that. How does Israel exist? How does Israel survive? It's impossible. And yet people take it for granted because it's been going on for so long, 77 years, that people just take it for granted. It's a miracle every morning that Israel's still on the map. That you snot-nosed British and Irish rock bands, free Palestine, Jordan to the sea, the river to the sea. You've got the whole world against Israel, with the exception of Christian fundamentalists and some Muslims and some Catholics. But you have most of the world against Israel, and she flourishes. She doesn't merely survive. Do you need more proof? America stood by South Vietnam and the country disappeared. America went into Afghanistan, America lost. Israel is the one success story for America. So when Bil'am tries to put a curse on the Jews, his recognition is the only way we can do a curse is we have to turn God against them. And to turn God against them, it's not a matter of negotiating with God. We have to get them to sin. Again, that sounds superstitious. Fine. Our class, most people in the class, are of a different mindset and do not see the superstition. Those attending live on Zoom and those following on YouTube. But that's what most of the world would think. But we believe it. And as I say, that's why you have people in Israel who say there must be yeshivas and kollels, kollim, and batei medrash, houses of study, where people are sitting and learning Torah. And we need to have Jews observing Torah. All right, there's a great number of Jews who don't observe Torah. And Israel, like America, has its fair share of Jews who hate Torah and hate religion and oppose it with the most incredible vehemence. What can we do? And God understands you cannot have 100% fidelity. But the challenge on us is to try to bring people on the road back. And if we don't succeed, at least try. And that's why we invite people for Shabbat. And that's why we invite people to come to shul. And that's why we try to bring people, why you see the Chabad do all the things they do. Going in the streets and trying to get a person to take a lulav and etrog during Sukkot time and say the bracha on a lulav etrog, or whatever it might be, that to fill in the streets. The idea is we don't try to get non-Jews to do it. Where Christians try to convert Jews, we don't try to convert Christians. We have no interest. When a non-Jew comes to convert, we do just the opposite. We seek to dissuade them 3 separate times before we even consider bringing a non-Jew towards conversion. Reform, well, that's not Judaism. Conservative, that's not Judaism. But Orthodox Torah Judaism, we try to dissuade 3 times. But we try to bring Jews closer to Judaism. So what we have here is Bil'am wants to turn God away from his people. And to do it, instead of saying, let's get the Jews to eat non-kosher or to violate Shabbat, he says their God is particularly strenuous about sexual morality, that the Torah and his laws, he has a special focus on sexual morality. And that distinguishes the Jewish people from every other people on earth. Now, if you'll say to me, but Rabbi, how about you just mentioned Harvey Weinstein, and I could mention this one and that one. Yes. Are there individuals who are just the opposite? Even individuals who are religious, but not really religious, only a front and virtual signaling? Yes. Unfortunately. What do you expect? We're dealing with human beings. If you have 1,000, 1,000,000 human beings, people are not robots, and there are all kinds, and there will be outliers. But there is no doubt, if one is fair-minded, that Jews have a sexual morality, particularly in the religious community, that is different from the non-Jewish world. Again, are there exceptions? Absolutely. And yet, who could doubt this? The very idea, unfortunately, and we don't have time for it today, there's a lot more to be said on the subject of Jews and financial ethics. And sometimes when there's a news story that there is a business ethics scandal, and it turns out that the name is Bernie Madoff, or something like that, many of us Jews, we just shrivel. And we shudder. Oh, no, not another Jew involved in one of those. Because we know that most of us are so incredibly honest and ethical. We give tzedakah and we're honest. And oh, no, it fits into the stereotype of Shylock. But when there's a national scandal about sex, and yes, Jeffrey Epstein is the exception there, you don't expect that to be a Jewish thing. If you'll go and you'll say, well, Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, yeah. And I can show you Protestant ministers. If someone starts up with me and says, what about Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein? Don't go there. What about Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker of the PTO Club? And I could start naming names. And I can go on Google and I'll find plenty of names for you. Don't start up with me. Don't start up with me if you want to point Harvey Weinstein and Epstein. We'll start talking about Catholic priests. You want to go that route? Let's talk Catholic priests and cardinals. Okay? So don't you start up with us. When it comes to sexual morality, we are different. Part of it is we have so many laws. Mikveh. Who has mikveh? What other people has anything like mikveh? The idea that a married couple have certain restrictions every month until the wife reaches her 50s or 60s or whatever, every month. The idea of having physical contact with someone you're not married to. If you're married and someone else, you can't touch ladies. A man can't touch ladies. And you have these laws, and they exist for a reason. not to have adultery, not to have extramarital affairs. Again, are people perfect? No, they're not. Can we point to lots of exceptions of people who are not perfect? Of course we can. But there's no question. Jewish sexual morality, all you need is mikveh as a starter. There's just nothing like it. I mean, you want to talk about diet. So we have kashrut. Used to be Catholics would only eat fish on Friday night. Maybe there are certain people, the Muslims have halal. Okay. Shabbat, we have it on. We have all our laws of Shabbat, Friday night, Saturday, and the Christians have Sunday, and the Muslims have Friday. I don't know who has Thursday or Tuesday, but those are available and open for anyone who wants them. But the one thing they don't have is mikvah and the laws. And chapter 18 of Vayikra, book of Leviticus, all the forbidden relationships is essential. So what Bil'am recommends is we have to get the Jews to be on a massive scale immoral, sexually immoral. Because an individual here and there, God is not going to turn on the nation if it's an individual here and there, even if it's a lot of individuals. But if it's a nation moving in that direction, if it's a massive open defiance of Jewish sexual laws, now you got something. And maybe he will curse. So in chapter 24 of Sefer Bamidbar, that's the strategy, to create a situation by which the Jewish people will violate sexual mores. Now, the idea furthermore, and we've learned this on Tuesday nights as well, there are halachot that work on the premise that non-Jewish women cannot be, you cannot even assume that a non-Jewish woman has not been sexually promiscuous. That doesn't mean you walk over to someone and call her a this or a that. But for halachic purposes, for assumptions under the law, we assume that a non-Jewish woman has had more than one sexual partner out of marriage, whether while married, violating a marriage, or before marriage. But you don't expect Beis Yaakov girls. And that's the reason, we've explained this before on Tuesday night when we talk about Ma'acha, the woman one of whom King David married, the Ishat Yifat Tor, the beautiful woman he took in battle against the king of Geshur. We learned this on many Tuesday nights, that if a non-Jewish woman has a baby with a Jewish man, the baby is considered non-Jewish. The baby is considered non-Jewish because we go by the mother. But if she got impregnated before, and then she converts to Judaism, and the baby comes out after her conversion, the baby came out of the womb of a lady who at that moment was Jewish, so the baby's Jewish. Come out of the non-Jewish woman before her conversion, non-Jewish, has to be converted. Come out of the womb of the non-Jewish woman after she converts, Jewish, baby's Jewish. But in both cases, the baby has no father. We learned this. What tribe will the baby be? In Judaism, the baby follows the father. But if the baby was born of a father of a man who impregnated a non-Jewish woman, there is no father, because we don't know who the father is. That's a halacha. So even if she'll prove otherwise, the halacha says you cannot prove otherwise, we don't believe you. With all due respect, we have to assume we don't know who the father is. The only man you were with this Jewish man, we don't know that. You say so, we don't know that. We assume the child was not necessarily born of that man, so the baby has no tribe, which is why the child of a convert, there's all these other laws, you have to be kind to them because they don't have a tribe. They don't have a chilek in the land of Israel, portion of land of Israel. So with that as background, one last piece. In these biblical times that we're learning now, there's an interplay between having sex with a woman and it overlaps into religion on top of it, not only in terms of getting God angry if the nation lapses, God forbid, But there are cases, many, many cases, where a Jewish man gets involved with a non-Jewish woman, and the next thing you know, he gets involved with her religion. So it's not merely that he's Jewish and he retains his Jewishness, whatever that means, and she's not Jewish. But the next thing they know, I remember, and I'm not saying it because of the politics, of the Democrat-Republican politics. It's just it was so flagrant, so open and notoriously flagrant at the last DNC, Democrat National Convention, when they made speeches honoring Kamala Harris, who was going to be the nominee, and had all the speakers that would, and they had her family. They had Doug Emhoff speaking to tell us what a wonderful wife she is and how honored he is to be her husband and how wonderful she is. And I'll never forget, I listened to all the speeches, listen to both sides, make an informed decision. And he gets up there and he says, we share so much. On Passover, he used the adjective mean. She makes a mean brisket. That is what Pesach and the Seder is to Doug Emhoff, a mean brisket. Not a word about the Haggadah, not a word about matzah, not a word about maror, not a word about Pesach. On Passover, we have an amazing marriage. On Passover, she makes a mean brisket. All right, in and of itself, narishkeit, foolishness. But then he continued, and every Easter, I go with her to church. Now, what's that about? What business does a Jew have in church on Easter? Christians belong in church on Easter. A Christian who does not go to church on Easter has to answer to me, what's your problem? Jew doesn't belong in church on Easter. What a chil Hashem. What a desecration of God's name. And this is not only Doug Emhoff. It's just he was open and notorious, talking about it proudly. But another one that made it big and proud, Anthony Weiner, when he was involved with Huma Abedin. Huma Abedin, the Muslim Arab from Saudi Arabia, who was like the girl Friday to Hillary Clinton and was married to Anthony Weiner before his terrible laptop scandals and everything. There was a feature story in the New York Times about that married couple, that power couple in Washington, D.C., before he became defrocked. And they talked about how he's a Jew from Brooklyn and Queens, Anthony Weiner, married to a Muslim Arab. And in the story, it said that on Ramadan, he's talking about how beautifully they get together and they mesh their two different ways and backgrounds and lives. On Ramadan, he fasts on Ramadan. And you sit and you read this. You hear how Emhoff goes to church on Easter as part of his marriage with Kamala, and how Weiner fasts on Ramadan as part of his marriage to Hamadin. And you see exactly what the Torah is warning about when it gets into you must not have intermarriage, because it's not only about sexual immorality and a forbidden sexual intercourse, but it overlaps into one's very core religious identity and uncompromised relationship with God. Uncompromised. Isn't that what the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 pronouncements, the so-called 10 commandments say? God is a jealous, zealous God, and may have no other gods before me. It says that in the 10 commandments. It's a bad translation, 10 commandments. The 10 pronouncements, 10 declarations. But it says it. You may have no other gods besides me. You may not have church on Easter, Doug Emhoff. You may not fast on Ramadan, Anthony Weiner, and all the rest like that. Let's go to some text here. This is very important, foundational to what we're going to learn the next 2-3 weeks. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, vayachel ha'am liznot el b'nei Moav. So Bil'am had tried unsuccessfully to place a curse on the Jewish people. And he now is leaving, failing in his task, doing what he was supposed to, and he gave them the disclosure. The caveat, it may not work out the way you want. And so his idea was, let's get the Jews liznot, to engage in essentially prostitution with Benot Moab, the daughters of Moab. It could have said Neshei Moab, the women of Moab. There's a bad translation as always. So, Rabbi, why do you use that translation if it's always wrong? Because it's an excellent layout. First of all, it's very internet friendly, and anything important, I'll just correct. And it's very user friendly, but it's just an incredibly bad translation. The Jewish Publication Society, Contemporary Torah. Benot Moab, the daughters. So the Jews began to prostitute with the daughters of Moab. Now the thing is that, what's going on here? Verse 2. V'tekranu la'am l'zivchei Eloheihen. And these daughters of Moab, and we are told that they actually are women of Midian, yet another country. Bil'am, as he was leaving Moab to go back home, passed by Midian, and it occurred to him that the Moabites basically are a little bit moral, but the Midianites are utterly immoral. And he negotiated with the Midianites to send their unmarried women to prostitute, to present themselves into the camp of Israel, wearing almost no clothing and just showing up for sex. And the men not knowing, I mean, they're just all over the place. Vayochal ha'am vayishtachavu le'Eloheihen. And the Jewish nation, now it was not everyone, and it was not even the majority, but it was around 24,000 men. And they not only accepted invitations to engage in sex with these lewd and immoral women, but within the few moments or whatever that they spent, whether it was 5 minutes or an hour, they agreed to prostrate themselves to little statues of the Midianite gods. Now, you say to yourself, well, come on, what does that mean? Because you can't picture it in the year 2025, that you're going to have a bunch of women like prostitutes that are standing on the street corners of places where prostitutes hang out. And each one's got a little Saint Christopher or whatever little saint they carry. And when they take the man into some private place, whether a car or a motel, a seedy motel room, that the woman says, before you engage in sex with me, I want you to kiss this Buddha or this little Saint Christopher. Well, Saint Christopher, I believe, is their god of, or the patron saint of travel. So I don't know if they have a patron saint of sex. I'm not making a joke. I don't know what they have. I know they have a lot of patron saints. And anyway, it's not Catholics that we're talking about here. It's Moabites. So they had a little statue. And this was their instructions, because the instructions were to get the Jews to deviate from the God of Israel. Sounds crazy. Sounds almost laughable and exaggerated. A parody, but that's what it was. That Bil'am said with the Midianites, you need to send lewd, naked, or almost naked prostitutes to go in the camp of Israel with little statuettes and pull a man in, have him kiss the statue, and have sex with him. And don't ask why, just do it. I have my plan, and you'll be paid well for it. And that was the plan. If you could get enough Jews not only violating Torah law and having sex with these women outside of the halakha, but kissing these little gods like Doug Emhoff in church on Easter, or Anthony Weiner fasting on Ramadan, God forbid, it could impact the entire Jewish nation. Remember everything I've said in today's introduction. None of it was a political discussion tonight. Tonight was not for politics, but for theology, understanding that the state of Israel exists by virtue of God's miracles. And when God turns his face, he doesn't even have to punish. He just, God forbid, if he hides his face, hester panim, if he simply looks the other way without proactively blessing with miracles, all bets are off. So let's look at the commentaries and start getting, and we're getting deeper into it now. The Gemara, Sanhedrin 106a. This is the Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin 106a. Let's see. Bil'am said to the Moabites and the Midianites, the God of these Jewish people despises lewdness, and they desire linen garments, because they've been trekking in the sweaty, hot desert since they left Egypt on the way to the land, and they don't have dry cleaners, they don't have washing machines and dryers, they don't have clothespins. They're wearing garments that are just sweat day after day after day, drenched in sweat. They despise, their God despises lewdness, and they desire fresh linen garments. And keep in mind, linen is from flax, F-L-A-X, which is common in Egypt. So they were used to linen. They weren't worried about linen getting wrinkled. Linen is a wonderful shirt and blouse in the summer. It raises a problem with the wrinkles, but it absorbs and it's just great in the summer. A light linen, you know that. They have no new garments. Come, I will give you advice. Make like a partition, make like cubbies, make like booths, set up partitions like little stores, big enough for 2 people and a little bit more space than that. Like imagine if it were urban, imagine a street of a lot of stores. So instead, set up a lot of booths, like a state fair or a festival. Make enclosures using wall hangings, in other words, partitions, and seat prostitutes in them, and a front door of each room. So each room, just set them up in the desert, like an oasis of 5, 10, 20, 1,000 of these things. If you've ever been to a public place where, for example, they have porta potties, and this is not about porta potties, but if you've ever been to a place with a porta potty, so they have like a big state fair kind of thing. They'll have like 100 porta potties. So not porta potties, but something nicer, little stores, and seat prostitutes, 1 in each one. And outside in front of each room, an old woman, a young woman inside, and have the old woman outside offering to sell them linen garments. Balak made for them enclosures using wall hangings from the snow mountain, the Hermon, and built Beit Hayashimot, and he sat prostitutes in them. So the king, Balak of Moab, did exactly as advised by Bil'am the prophet. He set up all these portable booths, like sukkahs actually, little sukkahs or booths. Each one has a prostitute inside, closed door, old lady outside, and a young woman on the inside. And at the time when the Jewish people were eating and drinking and glad and going out to stroll in the marketplace, the old woman would say to the Jew, "Are you seeking linen garments?" "Yeah, I could use one." That would be not yet. What, you're offering linen garments? He would enter the enclosure, and inside is not an old woman. She's outside. Inside is the prostitute, dressed like a prostitute. He would enter the enclosure and ask the price. The old woman would quote him a price equal to its value, fair price, fair market value, and the young woman would then quote him a lower price. The scenario would repeat itself 2 or 3 times. I don't know, the old woman saying $60, and the young woman is saying $20. So the guy is going to tell the old woman, please step outside a moment. I'd like to negotiate with this lady. After all, she's pleasing to the eye, and her price is pleasing to the pocket, and I want to do business with her. We're still only talking linen shirt, linen garment. They're not shirts in those days. And thereafter she would say to him, you're like a member of our household. Sit and choose for yourself the merchandise you want. And she'd bring out a jug of non-kosher wine. As you know, nowadays, we are only allowed to drink Jewish wine. What is Jewish wine? Wine that has not been touched by non-Jews. The only exception is if it's yayin mevushal, wine that has been brought to a boil. We're not going to get into that now, take us too far astray. But a non-Jew is not allowed to touch. If a non-Jew touches wine, it's not kosher. Doesn't mean literally touching the liquid, but even an open bottle. If a non-Jew touches a corked, closed, I don't mean subsequently corked, but originally corked, airtight bottle, that's okay. But once it's been uncorked, simply the idea that you put the cork back on, no good. If a non-Jew touches it, no good. If you're having a meal and you have a lot of people at dinner, and one of them is a non-Jew, and you ask somebody to pass the wine from the other side of the table, and as they're passing the wine, they're passing it, the non-Jew touches the wine, the bottle, the wine's not kosher. So you have to be sure you have only yayin mevushal, so-called boiled wine, so that when it's passed, the fact that it's a non-Jew touching doesn't matter. Likewise, all the kosher restaurants use yayin mevushal, that way the non-Jewish waiters can pour the wine. Ammonite wine, in other words, wine made by non-Jews, by people from Ammon, Moab, whatever. So she would say, you're like a member of the family, this beautiful prostitute who's offering linen garments at $20 or shekels or whatever. And she'd sit down, you're like a member of the family, come drink, here's a little wine, sit down, take a little bit of wine. And neither Ammonite wine nor Gentile wine had been prohibited yet for Jews. So it's not like the Jew instinctively would react and say, I'm not allowed to drink this. He's allowed to. She'd say to him, is it your wish to drink a cup of wine? Sure, why not? Once he drank the wine, now his evil inclination would burn within him. Now he starts getting a little bit loose. He then would say to her, submit to me and engage in intercourse with me. They are alone inside this booth. The door is closed. The way she is dressed, clearly she's ready for action. He's not talking to someone dressed like Mother Teresa. Clearly she's ready for action. So he says, let's do it. She then removed the idol that she worshipped from her lap and said to him, worship this. What does that mean? There's a more specific, they explain later in the Gemara, but for your purposes right now, imagine kiss the Buddha, kiss this thing. He said to her, and this is thousands of these Jewish men suddenly having these women descend upon them from the Midianites and the Moabites, offering to sell linen garments, but really, here's what's unfolding. And he would say, I'm Jewish. I'm forbidden from engaging in idol worship. Can you imagine at least Doug Emhoff saying that to Kamala? Kamala, I can't go into church. I'm Jewish. Halavai. Can you imagine Anthony Weiner saying to Huma, I cannot fast on, it's bad enough that I'm intermarried with a non-Jew. Doesn't matter that she's Muslim. It could just be any kind of non-Jew. But at least to have the self-respect to say, I don't do Ramadan. Halavai, if only. But in these cases, they would say, she'd say to him, what do you care? We're asking you to do nothing more than defecate in its presence. And there's a whole discussion that the way that God was worshipped is they would defecate in its presence. It's a whole long thing. Disgusting. So anyway, I will not leave you until you deny the Torah of Moshe, your teacher. Once he did so, she say, I'm asking you to deny your Torah. As it says in Hosea, prophecy. But when they came to Baal Peor, they separated themselves to the shameful item, and they became detestable like that which they loved. Okay? And so what ends up happening is they don't necessarily utterly abandon the God of Israel, but rather what they do is they take on this other religion. They take on both. Originally, according to Ibn Ezra, there had been no intention of committing idolatrous acts at all. All the males had intended was to indulge their libido with the women folk who made themselves available. However, these people fell victim to precisely the warning of the Torah of what would happen if Jews would allow the Canaanites to remain in their country and conclude a covenant with them. It happens one step at a time, invited to their social gatherings, resulting in their eating forbidden foods, and eventually intermarriage, followed by lip service to their gods, is exactly Doug Emhoff. And I'm saying Emhoff only, there are Republicans just as bad. Absolutely. It's just, I don't know anyone who ever was so open about it, not only open about being intermarried, but telling thousands upon thousands of people in an auditorium, a stadium with tens of thousands more watching, bragging that he goes to church on Easter to be with his wife. But that's what the Torah warned. Exactly. First, you're invited to their social gatherings. First, someone says, Doug, I know you're divorced. You had been married to another non-Jewish woman, and you had an affair with the lady that was your child's first grade teacher and nanny, and you got her pregnant, and your marriage ended. And I'd like to set you up with she's very beautiful, and she's very smart. Well, certainly she's beautiful. And he goes out with Kamala Harris, or whatever last name she was using at the time. And next thing you know, you're eating forbidden foods. You go out to a non-kosher restaurant. Where's he going to go? Take her to a place under hashgacha? Tell Kamala Harris, who's being set up on a date, maybe to marry if they hit it off right, that he only eats in kosher restaurants? Of course he's going to forbidden foods. And eventually intermarriage, followed by lip service. Next thing you know, he's in church on Easter. And everybody, I don't know what exactly they do, whether they sing Ave Maria, or Come Let Us Adore Him, or the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in, I don't know what they say in church but what does he do there for an hour? What does he do? He stands there with his mouth shut after years and years? Lip service. Does he believe it? No. No way does I'll give him that. No way does he believe Jesus is the Son of God. He doesn't believe anything. But he'll pay lip service in church. Or Anthony Weiner. So this is exactly what we were warned in the Torah. Sforno spells it out, clear as can be. He spells it out. And with this we close tonight. This is what the Torah says. In the book of Shemot, Lamed Dalet, Exodus 34, where God says, don't make deals with them. Don't make covenants with them. Don't let them be in your land. Don't let them be in your land, for you must not worship any other God, because Hashem, whose name is Kana, zealous, is a jealous, zealous God. There's no room for shared gods. He doesn't agree that as long as you believe in me, go ahead and believe in others too. Our God is not part of a polytheistic Pandora. Pantheon. There's only one God. He's jealous, so to speak. You must not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. When you go into Eretz Israel, the land that I'm bringing to you from Egypt, no covenants with the Canaanites. They will lust after their gods and sacrifice to their gods and invite you, and you will eat of their sacrifices. And when you take wives into your households from among their daughters for your sons, their daughters will lust after their gods and will cause your sons to lust after their gods. And this is the concern. So as we are in this honeypot section of our Thursday night class, Jewish Ethics and Values in Times of War, even in biblical times, sex was being used in a different but related way for military purposes. In the case of Yael, sex, the suggestion, and maybe 7 times sex, we learned last time, to bring him into her tent, get him to fall asleep, and then kill him. Here, using sex to turn the God of Israel against the nation, so that Balak and Moab would be able to make war and win. And that's part of what we deal with. We need to be a holy nation. To this day, that is why Orthodox Jews are so concerned that Jewish people observe Torah, be moral and ethical, and give God reason to shower blessings on the nation. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.